I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. Rupert Murdoch and his Fox businesses, his right-wing extremist businesses, supposed media companies, they have all turned on Donald Trump this morning, a day after the midterm elections, where MAGA Republicans who have taken over the Republican Party were all talking about the red wave, but it was not a red wave. It was a red wedding for MAGA Republicans, a red wedding for the GOP. Not just underwhelming, but MAGA Republican candidates with mostly embarrassing and humiliating performances. We are still getting the results in, of course, of the midterms. And yes, there were disappointing results as well for Democrats and the pro-democracy movement. But by and large, the midterm elections were a searing indictment against MAGA extremism, against the weirdness, the dangerousness, the pro-fascism, all of that has become the modern Republican Party, which is now the MAGA Republican Party. So I just want to show you a post right now that Fox made on Trump's social media platform, his failing platform, Truth Social. This is what Fox wrote. They have a photo of Trump, and they wrote, "Conservatives point finger at Trump after GOP's underwhelming election results." And then they quote someone as saying, "He's never been weaker." That part is true. He's never been weaker. And underwhelming election results would be putting it lightly, because if you were watching a little bit of Fox last night, which I just wanted to see for a second as we got into the afternoon hours, they were giddy. They were predicting the red wave, but it was not a red wave at all. As I've said before, it was the red wedding for the MAGA Republican Party. And then they go on to say, "Conservatives point finger at Trump after GOP's underwhelming election. Some conservatives are saying it may be time for the GOP to ditch Donald Trump after election results in the Senate and elsewhere showed a lackluster push from his candidates." Lackluster. I just love how they try to downplay it there, but nonetheless, blaming Donald Trump for the loss, for their defeats, for their inability to get the red wave that they were expecting and telling everybody would take place. And with that line above, "He's never been weaker." That is a shot through the bow directed directly at Donald Trump. And here you have a Fox News commentator, Mark Thiessen, who used to be a speechwriter in the Republican presidential administration. And he says these midterms are a searing indictment of what the Republican Party is today. Play the clip.
We have the worst inflation in 4 decades. The worst collapse in real wages in 40 years, the worst crime wave since the 1990s, the worst border crisis in U.S. history. We have Joe Biden, who is the least popular president since Harry Truman, since presidential polling happened, and there wasn't a red wave. That is a searing indictment of the Republican Party. That is a searing indictment of the message that we have been sending to the voters. They looked at all of that and looked at the Republican alternative and said, no thanks. The Republican Party needs to do a really deep introspection look in the mirror right now, because this is an absolute disaster for the Republican Party, and we need to turn back. We need to look at who won today. Ron DeSantis, DeWine, these governors, Kemp, Abbott. Look at these governors. This is the path to the future. At electing these radical candidates who ran far behind them has put the Republican Party in a terrible position, and voters have have indicted the Republican Party.
No, we've been talking about this here on the MeidasTouch Network, and the thing I want to point out is going back to that post that Fox made on Truth Social, where they go, some conservatives are saying it may be time for, let me say this. If you supported Donald Trump, if you supported MAGA extremism, election denialism, if you supported the insurrection, if you supported these violent insurrectionists who invaded the Capitol and tried to kill police officers and literally put their feces on the wall of the Capitol building, engaged in the most horrific and heinous conduct and call them political prisoners, if you rooted for the pandemic, if you were pro-pandemic, if you had those qualities, if you're taking away people's freedoms, you were never conservative. You are not conservative, and we've called that out here time and time again on the MeidasTouch network, on our podcast, that these people are not conservative. And we've done the video series, which we've called the mass exodus of Republicans and independents away from this MAGA Republican Party, which has taken over what the Republican Party is today. We've been telling you about these trends and what was actually going on here in the country as MAGA Republicans tried to flood the field with their phony and bogus polls to try to psych people out. We were sharing the real data with you of what was going on in the early vote, what was going on across the United States of America, objectively with data, what people were actually feeling. And I'll show you just another thing that the Murdoch businesses did. Their New York Post wrote Day Future, how DeSantis romps to victory in Florida. They call him Day Future. Again, that is another way of subtly, or not so subtly, attacking Donald Trump, that he is not their future. And other Fox entities have continued to post anti-Trump stuff the entire day. One thing to mention, though, is this is the New York paper. This just shows you still how phony and bogus and radical the Murdoch businesses are. Okay, this is a New York paper. Their whole cover page is Day Future about DeSantis. And on the very bottom, it goes, plus, Hochul claims victory in New York. Hochul claims victory. The New York governor isn't the front page. Instead, you have DeSantis saying the future, and it's not Hochul wins. It's Hochul claims victory in New York. I mean, just completely pathetic. And one thing I want to point out, too, with the mainstream media, who was basically wrong about everything, and here on the MeidasTouch Network, we pointed that out. Fortunately, because you watch this, you know that we've been giving you the real data. It's funny because I've been talking to people who have got the results from last night, and they're like, I wasn't all that surprised because I've been watching the MeidasTouch Network, but people I know have been absolutely very surprised because they've been still watching the mainstream media and not getting the actual data, but that's because we're providing you with the real data here. But one thing I want to point out, though, is, okay, the mainstream media's new thing is let's just talk about DeSantis this, DeSantis that, because the media goes right back to its default of rooting on radical Republicans and fascist-leaning people. What about Governor Whitmer? What about the resounding victory of Governor Whitmer, of Governor Hochul, of all the other great Democratic governorship victories across the country? I mean, do you hear the mainstream media talking about all of those races? Josh Shapiro, people talking about that. Gretchen Whitmer, people talking about that. Tony Evers, people talking about that in Wisconsin. Wes Moore in Maryland, people talking about that. Maura Healey in Massachusetts, people talking about, no, it's DeSantis. They're wrong. They know they were wrong on this election, yet they set up the same fallacious paradigm that gets us all in this place in the first place. But fortunately, not only are people making a mass exodus away from MAGA extremism, they're making a mass exodus away from mainstream media and towards the MeidasTouch Network, where we are delivering the truth, where we had the right experts who were giving you the data in advance. Simon Rosenberg, Tom Bonnier, and others here, where we highlighted the right candidates who we brought on the platform, who you all got to meet. And now the mainstream media is like, oh, who's this candidate? Who's that? This is a shocker. But you all met these incredible candidates by watching the MeidasTouch network. But one thing that is true for sure, though, about what Murdoch is saying here is that Republicans are turning against Donald Trump right now. And not only does that leave him vulnerable to having his entire future political ambitions crushed, but it leaves him very vulnerable to prosecutors right now who see what is going on, that he's no longer being protected by a major political party. Now, that's to be determined, but that is definitely one of the things that we are seeing. And for example, big victory, New York Attorney General Letitia James, her fraud lawsuit seeking at least $250 million for Donald Trump's fraudulent valuation schemes, that proceeds. The MAGA extremists who are tried with criminal charges in New York, like Steve Bannon, not going to get the pardon that he was hoping for in that prosecution. We've got Fani Willis, the Fulton County District Attorney, moving forward with her investigation. The quiet period is basically over. It's probably going to be extended a little longer now because there's going to be a runoff in the Georgia senatorial election, but that will be moving forward. Merrick Garland probably taking notice of what's taking place here. Trump is out there very vulnerable, and I think that the Republicans would actually want to see him indicted at this point and would welcome it. Now, these are very, very, very cowardly people, as we all know, in this MAGA Republican Party. So we will see if, knowing all of the data, they still flock to Donald Trump because they want to repeat the same mistakes that they've made before, because that is their inherent inclination to be bad people. We will see, but certainly Rupert Murdoch today is turning his apparatus against Donald Trump, trying to marginalize Donald Trump, going so far as to post on Donald Trump's social media platform with the text, "He's never been weaker." Look, Midas Mighty, I want to thank you again. At the end of these videos, I'm just going to thank you because, look, we still have a lot of results to count, but I do want to say this. One thing is for sure, that these midterm elections showed the importance of our democracy. Voters understood the importance of our democracy, and by and large, not everywhere, there were definitely disappointing results, but democracy itself was on the ballot. A woman's freedom over her body was on the ballot. The rights of young people were on the ballot. The freedoms of us all were on the ballot. Gen Z delivered, grassroots delivered, women delivered, you delivered. I'm so grateful to even have a small part in amplifying all of those voices and your voices each and every day here on the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button right now. We are on our way to 1 million subscribers with your support. It's free to subscribe, so subscribe right now. In addition, go check out our Patreon website at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There's lots of great exclusive content there that you can only get on patreon.com. Extra podcast, extra behind the scenes stuff, extra merch drops, incredible stuff there. You can become an honorary producer of the MeidasTouch podcast, and your name appears at the end of the podcast that I do with me and my brothers, and so much more. But you see the importance now of independent media. And this network is a community. We are not funded by any outside investors. We purely rely on you. So help build this network. Go over to patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We appreciate you. I'm Ben Meiselas.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.